Pros and cons of an HOA. Let's get into it. All right, hey everybody, welcome back. Thank you for joining us. We're talking about HOAs. There are pros and cons. We both live in an HOA.
Yes, sir.
We're gonna sort of have maybe a semi-playful time with this because HOAs can sometimes be ridiculous.
And stressful.
Yes.
And if you keep your mind straight, you can realize that they're there for one purpose, and that purpose is to keep the value in an area.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. And that's a pro.
That is a pro.
That's a big
We
pro.
want to make sure that your area doesn't have a purple house and a green house and a pink house and and then one doesn't have 14 cars in the front yard and the other one doesn't have a horse buggy, right?
Right.
So they want to keep congruency, keep things looking similar, not maybe necessarily exactly the same, but similar. Nowadays, what we're starting to see in most new build construction sites and developments is that there are 4 different styles of homes, what the front face looks like, and then 4 or 5 different color patterns, and they never put the same home in the same color pattern next to each other. So you have some diversity, but like your shirt today, Joe, there are different things in there, but there's a calming feeling because they're the same 4 or 5 different things.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even away from an HOA, some cities have zoning regulations to where there can't be the same home right next to one another.
Yeah, yep. Exactly right. So they fall within it. You know, the other thing that HOAs do that we want to call pros are community perks, right? So what is a community perk? Well, in some HOAs, they're gated. Not all HOAs, but some HOA developments are gated. That's a perk that keeps people from coming in and out of the development that you're unaware of and allows safety features. People can feel comfortable that they're not letting riffraff into the area, right?
Yeah.
And you know what's going on with crime? I mean, crime is a big surging thing right now in the United States. So a lot of people like the homeowners associations with the gated communities. But you can also have nice homeowner associations where the perks are they connected with the police department, and the police department will make maybe 1 or 2 trips in the evening just to make sure that things are the way they should be.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, that's nice too. And I know at least as far as a perk within our community, my particular community, we are not gated.
Right.
However, we do have a pool. So we have a community pool. We can all gather there. We even have community events, where we could all sort of chat and meet each other and
Get to know each other.
Yeah.
And not drive in what we like to call the car pass, where you come in, you pass your neighbor, you raise your hand up, you open your garage door, you park in, you close your garage door, and that's the only time your neighbors see you. So a lot of these community perks can be the events like you were talking about. In some areas, they're putting parks in. Like where I live in my HOA, they've got 4 different parks for kids to play on.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, there's maintenance issues on stuff like that, so that's why you have these HOAs, so there's money there to take care of that.
Sure.
We talked about uniformity. That's something else that HOAs will create. They'll allow the uniformity of, you can't let all these weeds grow in your yard.
Yeah.
Or the wind knocked over your tree, it's got to get cleaned up, okay?
Yep.
We have uniformity in putting, I'll call them sheds or secondary residences maybe, okay?
Yep.
So we want to keep uniformity, and so nobody has this big Sears and Roebuck plastic shed right in front of their house that makes it look like,
right. Have 5 cars parked in the yard.
Yes,
Yeah. That can be an eyesore for sure.
Yep.
I even came across an HOA where I just sold a house. They didn't allow solar on the front because it detracts from the look. Now you could have it on the side or the back, but they want to keep that uniformity. Like you're talking about.
The appeal.
Right.
Yeah, they want
the curb appeal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then in other areas, Joe, a pro would be there's like additional coverages. Now you might be in different types of HOAs, like for a townhouse or a condo or a single family unit, right?
Yeah.
Well, the townhouse and or condo could have additional coverage from the HOA, like roof coverage. If you're in a condo that is more like an apartment type of deal. There's coverage for common things like the roof, okay, or sidewalks, or the parking lots. If the condos don't have separate garages, but they have covered parking,
Oh, yeah.
that kind of stuff is covered under like an umbrella type of coverage. We call that additional coverage by the HOA.
Gotcha. And I know within mine, we have trash covered.
Yeah.
And we have, which is a pretty common one. And then we have landscaping,
Yeah.
which is kind of nice. They even come in our front yards and
Pull the weeds.
do all the landscaping. I'm like, okay, this is worth it. This,
You know, in
this
Tucson,
makes
when
more-
it's 110, you don't want to be out there pulling weeds. Let somebody else do that. Here's an extra couple bucks for that, right?
Exactly. That makes your
Okay.
HOA fee worth it for sure.
Exactly. Now, we're talking about fees. Let's go to the cons,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Let's kind of trap into higher debt to income ratios. What do they mean by that, Joe?
Yeah. So we got to calculate when we're going into affordability. That is an extra fee that you have to cover within the umbrella of your mortgage payment, right? So the lender will have to figure out whether or not you will be able to afford this extra $100+, sometimes less, per month fee. So that definitely plays a part in you qualifying for living in that particular house.
Yeah, because it's a fixed expense.
Exactly
It's going
right.
to come every month.
Exactly
You can't
right.
only pay it when you feel like it, right?
Yeah. And then if you don't pay that to the HOA, I have mine on automatic, so I don't forget it. And I try to avoid getting letters from them, which mainly the letters come from your Christmas lights were up for too long,
Yeah.
something like that, at least for me. That they can potentially, if you miss your HOA dues, they could lien your property.
Yeah.
And that could be a bad thing. They can't foreclose on your property, right?
No, they've changed that law. They used to be able to foreclose on your property.
That was within Arizona.
Right.
Correct. Yeah. So that doesn't apply necessarily to every state. There's probably maybe some issues where they could potentially foreclose, but at least here they cannot.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's kind of nice. And now they can control fines. Have you seen that? I haven't seen a fine before in my 7-year career. Have you seen a fine levied against?
I've seen some crazy fines. Hey everyone, we want to interrupt this episode to let you know that we are a Keller Williams Southern Arizona franchise.
We are also realtors practicing equal housing. Now let's get you back to the podcast.
Against people. So unfortunately today everything is so political, whether you're on this side of the fence or on that side of the fence, right? So I've seen some of these signs where you had one particular political belief overstepping their boundary. I don't want to get too deep into this, but they've overstepped their boundary and harmed the neighbor,
Oh, wow.
harmed the development. The HOA sent the letter, says you stop this activity or we're going to fine you.
Yeah.
He was arrogant enough to say, I'm not stopping this activity, and they fined him.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
I've seen it also where they put up a flagpole.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's been, there's these pros and cons, and I'm not going to say which is right and which is wrong.
Sure.
Everybody picks their own, their own belief system. But the gentleman wanted to put up a flagpole, and he was a retired service person. They fined him. Went to court. He finally won. Yeah. Okay. Because of other precedents of other lawsuits, and he won, so they had to pull the fine back. But they can, that was a kind of a pain in the butt for the gentleman who put the flag up, and probably a pain in the butt for the people who didn't want to see the flag up. So what we're starting to see more of is more of a let's come together on what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate, right?
Yeah,
and let's listen to the other side about being appropriate or inappropriate, right?
Right.
Because we are changing as a society.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Growing pains always happen.
exactly. So these controlling fines, the severity of them, most of the time when somebody's in an HOA like myself, if I get a letter, it's usually, hey, you got to few too many weeks. Well, sorry, I was on vacation for 3 weeks,
Right.
and it rained here. So you take care of it. But it's the people that are gone, or they don't take care of their house and the paint is peeling.
Yeah.
Or in a lot of places, you have to have what they call a center focus tree or a focus tree.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So, and if that blows down, you got to replace it with another focus tree.
Yeah. So, and that focus tree is normally there when you buy the property.
Correct.
And if it happens, then you have to pay out of pocket and replace it.
Exactly.
The builder's not going to pay, or the HOA is not going to pay for that. Now, you can.
That's like forced conformity. We use that term, forced conformity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And that means that you can run for your HOA and get on the board and change the laws and CC&Rs. Yes, thank you. Codes, covenants, and restrictions is what that stands for. And you can make it change for today's sort of standards. We've seen some old things that may not even apply today, and most HOAs will sit and sort of change those rules and those CC&Rs and update them. Some don't. And that's where you can run into some issues. But if some don't, that means they're not a very active HOA.
Correct. So it's interesting because I'm now running for the HOA board in my community along with a couple other people. And the reason I want to take that on is because I want to keep the value of my property as high as possible. That's the main reason for being on the HOA for me.
Yeah.
And also to keep a safety factor within our community. Okay, so I want to make sure that we are interacting with the police department, the fire department, and the emergency service providers. They know where we are, how to get in, make sure the gates are, accessible to them. And most of the time they are, but if you're not maintaining the gates or the phone service that are associated with the gates, the fire department may not be able to get in fast enough. Right?
Sure.
So that's one of the reasons why I'm running for the HOA board.
Very cool.
And it's good if you want to change some things that are outdated, then you need to step up to the plate, and you need to run for the board to make those changes, because everything is changeable with enough people voting.
Yeah, no, exactly right. That's in our HOA, they do not allow short-term rentals, and that means less than 3 months to them. So that means no Airbnb. We can't have a room rented out or whatever for an Airbnb. Now, they do allow rentals, which not all HOAs do. And that can be a pain for someone who maybe buys a townhouse or a condo and wants to move up in a house, that was their first house, and keep that as a rental opportunity and grow their wealth that way. That can kind of be a pain to where they have to sell it instead of keeping it and growing their
Well,
wealth
what does that
way.
lead, Joe? That leads to what we do for a living, right? As a real estate agent.
Yeah.
You got to have a seasoned real estate agent who understands the potential of what you want to do, buy, hold, then move up and rent. That seasoned agent should be well aware of whether or not you can do that in the community that you're in.
Yes.
Or if you are, but you're hearing rumors because you're so involved in real estate, as a real estate agent, you hear rumors that it looks like maybe at the next board meeting, they're going to switch these rules, and this doesn't really fit with what you want to do, your business plan to grow that generational wealth that we always talk about.
Yeah.
You can link to, we'll put a link here to some other podcasts about generational wealth that we have. Getting back to, though, the agent you're working with, the real estate agent you're working with, you got to make sure they're seasoned enough to understand that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think that is even more important as you're going to purchase a property, if you're under contract during your inspection period and your discovery period. Make sure to read the CC&Rs.
Yeah.
So make sure to get that. And we are in an escrow state, and they provide the CC&Rs for you as a service.
Yes.
Which is really handy.
Yep.
And so that way you don't have to go diving in and looking for it and maybe finding an older one that doesn't work. And so maybe making sure you're understanding all of those codes, covenants, and restrictions that might apply to you. And I just recently they wanted to put in a pool, but an above ground pool to make it a little cheaper. And I read the CC&Rs. I said, it may not work. And it didn't.
Yeah.
So I said, sorry, we can't have an above ground pool. You can maybe build a pool in the future, save up a little bit, after you moved in. So,
something else, that the lack of transparency in HOAs. I've heard some crazy stories, and I'll give you a quick one here. I was selling a house to a retired lawyer, and he was reading over the CC&Rs, and then he wanted the income and expense and the balance sheet for the HOA, which very few people ask for, but you are entitled to. He noticed that there was over $400,000 in the reserve fund for the HOA, right? And the dues were like $225 a month. And there weren't that many people in the development, right? And it wasn't gated. They didn't have a pool. There were no parks. Basically, they were taking care of the front entrance, the monuments that have like the sign on it, and that's it. And that's it.
And hoarding the rest.
And hoarding the rest. And he went in front of the board and said, there's no reason for us to have this much. And he, the board shot him down. He ended up going and knocking on the doors of the neighbors. He got elected to the board. He got a couple other people, like-minded people, elected to the board. And they said, you know what? We're going to reduce the HOA for the next 5 years.
Wow. Yeah.
And we'll take the reserve we have, and we'll hang on. We'll use that, not just hang on to it. We'll use it to help maintenance costs. And then in 5 years, we'll bring the dues back up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really fair.
Yeah. So excessive, just pay attention and ask for transparency. And you've got to ask. You can't just sit back and be the squeaky wheel
and just accept
it, or don't do anything and bitch about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
that's a lot of what happens. Yeah. And one other thing that I don't want to miss is there are things called special assessments.
Yes.
Which can be levied where I know particular from my neighborhood is repaving. And that can be kind of expensive, right, for the entire neighborhood. So luckily we had enough in reserves to do it, but they did raise our dues and to refill the coffers.
Yeah.
So
and you don't mind that.
I don't mind that at all. Yeah, because it's a nice smooth road and it's taken care of. However, there can be large, just all of a sudden a special assessment, you owe $3,000, and maybe less so here in Tucson, but in other areas where maybe there's a structural issue in the building, a high-rise condo or something like that, that can be where you might find these larger special assessments where it could really take a toll on your pocketbook.
Yeah, those buildings, or sometimes they got to replace the water lines. There's sewer lines. There's all kinds of things that can happen with special assessments. Just like if you weren't in an HOA and the city needed to redo the roads or put in a sewer line, you're going to get a tax assessment on your property.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. But yeah, a part of a community where it can either function or not function. So do your research on this, especially if you're considering living in an area with an HOA. Definitely do your research. I think that's probably our best advice, right?
Yeah, and don't hesitate to ask your realtor to find out questions if you can't find them. Your realtor should be able to find these questions or these answers to your questions very easily.
Exactly right. So if we provided any value in this podcast to you, please be sure to like and follow our podcast. We will see you on the next one. Thank you for listening and watching the Nitty Gritty of Real Estate podcast here with the Tom J. Krieger team of Keller Williams, Southern Arizona. If you are interested in buying a home, selling a home, or even investing in real estate, we have 5,000 agents across the country that we can connect you to. If you need any free resources, feel free to check out our website at www.thetjkteam.com. We hope you have a great day.